I watched through the living room window as Dad loaded the last suitcase into the trunk, the one with the Mickey Mouse luggage tag that should have been mine. Mom was adjusting Emma's sparkly mini ears, her face glowing with maternal pride. My sister twirled in her new Disney princess dress, already practicing her princess wave for the Magic Kingdom. "Remember to feed yourself," Mom had said that morning, barely looking up from her phone as she scrolled through restaurant reservations at Disneyland. "There's instant ramen in the cupboard. We'll be back in a week." I was 12 years old. Emma was 9, and I was being left alone for 7 days while they took my sister to the happiest place on earth. But here's what they didn't know. I had lived this exact moment before. I had died at 28 in my previous life, alone in a hospital room with no family by my side because they had all been too busy with Emma's wedding. And somehow, the universe had given me a second chance, dropping my consciousness back into my 12-year-old body on this very morning. In my past life, I had cried when they left. I had called Mom's cell phone 17 times during their trip, each call going to voicemail. I had eaten nothing but ramen and stale crackers for a week. I had convinced myself that if I was just better, just quieter, just less of a burden, they would eventually love me the way they loved Emma. That version of me had been wrong. This time, as I watched the car pull away from the curb, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I remembered everything that was coming, and I knew exactly how to rewrite my story. The instant their car turned the corner, I went to Dad's office. The office was supposed to be locked, but Dad was predictable. In my previous life, I had eventually learned that he kept the key in the fake book on the hallway shelf, War and Peace, a book he would never actually read. I retrieved it now with steady hands, hands that remembered being older, being wiser, being done with this family's cruelty. Inside the office, I went straight to his filing cabinet. I knew exactly what I was looking for, the documents he had hidden from me my entire life. In my previous life, I hadn't discovered these until I was 25, and by then, it had been too late to do anything about it. My fingers found the folder marked Estate, Grandmother Chen. Grandmother Chen had died when I was 3 years old. I barely remembered her, just flashes of gentle hands and a soft voice singing Chinese lullabies. But I had learned the truth in my previous life, far too late. She had left everything to me. Her house, her savings, her investment portfolio, all of it designated for her eldest grandchild, specifically excluding my parents from control. The inheritance was worth millions. My parents had been named as trustees until I turned 18, at which point everything was supposed to transfer to my name. They had been receiving monthly statements for 9 years, watching my grandmother's wise investments grow. The money was supposed to be used for my education, my welfare, my future. Instead, they had spent it all on Emma. Every dance class, every pageant dress, every elaborate birthday party, every gifted child program had been funded by my inheritance. The money that was supposed to send me to college had instead paid for Emma's private tutors and competition fees. The house my grandmother had wanted me to have had been sold, and the proceeds had disappeared into Dad's business ventures and Mom's shopping addiction. In my previous life, when I had finally discovered this at 25, I had hired a lawyer. But too much time had passed, and my parents had covered their tracks well. They claimed the money had been spent on household expenses that benefited both children. They produced fake receipts and forged documents. The legal battle had drained what little resources I had, and I had eventually given up, broken and defeated. Not this time. This time, I was 12, and the evidence was fresh. The bank statements were right here in this folder, clearly showing withdrawals marked Emma's dance competition, Emma's wardrobe, Emma's bedroom remodel. They hadn't even bothered to hide it because they never imagined I would find it. I pulled out my phone, a cheap flip phone that was all I needed, according to Mom, while Emma had the latest iPhone, and began photographing every single page, every bank statement, every withdrawal slip, every investment report showing how my multi-million-dollar inheritance had been systematically drained to fund my sister's princess lifestyle. When I was done with the files, I moved to Dad's computer. The password was Emma's birthday, of course. I logged in and found his email, where I discovered something even more damning. Correspondence with the lawyer who had administered grandmother's estate, discussing how to manage the situation if I ever found out. There were emails to their accountant about creative bookkeeping, There was even a thread with Mom about how they would deal with it when I turned 18. Their plan had been to claim the money was all gone, spent on family necessities, and there was nothing I could do about it. I photographed everything, then carefully logged out and shut down the computer, leaving no trace that I had been there. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. In my previous life, I had been the forgotten child in every way that mattered. Emma was the star, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. I was the shadow, the disappointment, the one who was always in the way. I had spent my entire first life trying to understand why they hated me so much, what I had done to deserve being treated like an unwanted burden. Now, with the clarity of Rebirth, I understood the truth. They had never wanted me. I had been an accident, a disruption to their perfect young marriage. When grandmother Chen had died and left everything to me instead of to my parents, they had resented me even more. I was the obstacle between them and a fortune they felt entitled to. Emma, born later and deliberately, was the child they actually wanted, and my inheritance had allowed them to give her everything they thought she deserved. I had spent my first life internalizing their rejection, believing I was fundamentally unlovable. I had achieved nothing because every effort I made had been sabotaged. When I had gotten into a prestigious high school on scholarship, Dad had forgotten to submit my acceptance paperwork. When I had won a writing competition, Mom had thrown away the award letter before I saw it. When I had tried to apply for colleges, they had refused to provide tax documents, effectively blocking my financial aid applications. By the time I was 22 in my first life, I had been working 3 part-time jobs just to afford a tiny apartment, while Emma lived at home rent-free and attended an expensive private university, paid for with my inheritance, though I hadn't known it at the time. I had been so beaten down, so convinced of my own worthlessness, that I had barely survived. I had no degree, no career, no relationships. My parents had poisoned every friendship I tried to form, painting me as troubled and difficult. I had died alone in that hospital room at 28 of an illness I couldn't afford to treat properly. Emma hadn't even visited. Neither had my parents. The nurse had held my hand at the end, a stranger showing me more kindness than my family ever had. And then I had woken up in my 12-year-old body on the morning they left for Disneyland without me, and I had been given the gift of a second chance. Over the next 7 days, while my family frolicked at theme parks, I executed the first phase of my plan with the careful precision of someone who had lived it all before. First, I made copies of every document I had photographed and stored them in 3 separate cloud accounts with passwords my parents would never guess. Then I spent hours researching family law attorneys who specialized in trust and estate litigation. In my previous life, I had been naive, choosing a cheap lawyer who had been easily outmaneuvered. This time, I needed the best. I found her on the 3rd day of my solitude, Catherine Wu, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Her website showed a track record of winning cases against trustees who had misappropriated funds. She was expensive, but that wouldn't matter because my case was so clear-cut that she would almost certainly take it on contingency. I composed an email from a new account I created, laying out my situation with the clarity of an adult mind in a child's body. Dear Ms. Wu, I am 12 years old and I have evidence that my parents have stolen approximately $3.8 million from my inheritance over the past 9 years. My grandmother left everything to me in a bioeconomy trust, but my parents, who were named as trustees, have systematically diverted all funds to my younger sister while leaving me with nothing. I have bank statements, emails, and documented evidence of their fraud. I am currently home alone because they took my sister to Disneyland but left me behind, which is just one example of the pattern of favoritism and neglect. I know I'm young, but I am completely serious about this and I have proof. Would you be willing to review my case? I believe I have grounds for both civil and criminal action against my parents. I can be reached at this email address. Please note that I cannot give you a phone number as I am not allowed to have a proper phone, and my parents monitor my movements closely. They return from vacation in 4 days, after which my access to evidence may be limited. I attached several of the most damning documents to the email, just enough to prove I wasn't some kid playing make-believe, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The reply came 6 hours later. Dear sender, I have reviewed the documents you sent. If these are authentic, you have an exceptionally strong case. However, I need to verify certain details before proceeding. Can you provide me with your grandmother's full name, the approximate date of her death, and the county where her estate was probated? I can independently verify the existence of the trust and compare it to your documents. If everything checks out, I would be very interested in representing you. Please understand that due to your age, we will need to follow specific legal procedures, potentially involving a guardian ad litem, time-sensitive matters. Do you feel physically safe in your current situation? Do you have food and necessities? If you are in immediate danger, please call 911. Catherine Wu responded immediately with all the information she requested, plus the detail that I was physically safe but emotionally and financially abused, and that my parents would return in 4 days. I explained that I had access to adequate food and that the house was secure, but that I had been left alone as a pattern of neglect, not as a one-time emergency. Her next email came the following morning. I have verified your grandmother's estate. Everything you told me is accurate. I am taking your case. We need to move quickly. Can you safely receive a phone call? I need to speak with you directly to establish attorney-client privilege and to better understand your situation. I gave her my email address and explained that I could not receive phone calls safely, but I could communicate via email and video chat during the hours my family was away. We arranged a video call for that afternoon. When Catherine Wu's face appeared on my laptop screen, Dad's laptop, which I had appropriated for the week, I saw a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and businesslike. You're very composed for a 12-year-old who's been left alone for a week, she observed. I'm used to taking care of myself, I replied, which was true in more ways than she knew. We talked for 2 hours. I showed her everything, the documents, the emails between my parents, the withdrawal patterns, the evidence of how my inheritance had been spent exclusively on Emma. I explained the years of neglect and favoritism, the pattern of sabotage whenever I tried to succeed, the emotional abuse disguised as parental disappointment. I also told her something I hadn't put in the emails. There's more coming. When I turn 13 next month, I'm supposed to receive a separate trust from my grandfather, my dad's father. It's only about $200,000, but I'm certain they're planning to do the same thing. My grandfather died 2 years ago, and his will specified that his grandchildren would receive distributions at ages 13, 16, and 18. Emma gets hers at 13 next year, so they'll have to give her that one, but I think they're going to hide mine or claim it doesn't exist. Catherine's eyebrows rose. How do you know about this trust? I had prepared for this question. I found papers in my dad's office. I've been observant. They don't think I pay attention, but I do. It wasn't exactly a lie. In my previous life, I had learned about grandfather's trust when I was 26, long after the money should have come to me. This time, I was simply acting on foreknowledge. Smart girl, Catherine said, and something in her expression reminded me painfully of my grandmother, the only person who had ever truly loved me. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to file for an emergency hearing to have your parents removed as trustees and to have an independent trustee appointed. Given the evidence of misappropriation, I'm confident we can get a temporary restraining order preventing them from accessing any of your remaining assets. We'll also file a civil suit for recovery of the stolen funds plus damages. Depending on the severity of their fraud, there may be criminal charges as well, though that's up to the district attorney. Will I have to stay with them during all of this? I asked, letting my real fear show through. In my previous life, the years between 12 and 18 had been the worst. The abuse had escalated as I got older and more aware of the injustice. Emma had become cruel in her own right, learning from our parents that I was less than, acceptable to mock and belittle. Catherine's expression softened slightly. That's the tricky part. The court will likely want to keep you with family if possible. Do you have any other relatives who could take you? Aunts, uncles, older cousins? I shook my head. My mom's an only child. My dad has a brother, but they haven't spoken in years. I paused, then added carefully. There is one person. My grandmother, the one who left me the inheritance. She had a sister, my great-aunt Helen. She lives in San Francisco. We exchanged Christmas cards when I was younger, but my parents stopped that a few years ago. I don't know if she'd take me, but she might. This was a calculated gamble. Great-aunt Helen existed, but in my previous life, I had never actually met her as an adult. My parents had cut off contact with my grandmother's entire side of the family after she died, ensuring that no one would question what happened to my inheritance. But I remembered my grandmother speaking of her sister with love, and I knew from the Christmas cards that Helen had always asked about me, had always sent gifts that my parents had usually given to Emma instead. I'll look into that, Catherine promised. In the meantime, when your parents return, act normal. Don't let them know you found anything. Can you do that? I nodded. In my previous life, I had spent 16 years acting normal while dying inside. 4 more days would be nothing. They came home on a Sunday evening, sunburned and laden with shopping bags. Emma burst through the door wearing a new princess dress, her arms full of stuffed animals and souvenirs. "It was amazing!" she shrieked, running past me without so much as a hello. "We went on every ride and I met all the princesses and Daddy bought me a real crown and—" "Emma, inside voice," Mom chided. But she was smiling indulgently. She finally looked at me, standing in the hallway. "You're still here?" "Good. Did you eat?" "Yes," I said quietly, playing the role of the cowed, invisible daughter. "There's ramen left?" "Good." She moved past me, following Emma upstairs to help her unpack her treasures. Dad gave me a brief nod, slightly more acknowledgement than Mom had offered, then headed to his office with his briefcase. I felt a cold satisfaction. He would check his files eventually, would probably even look at his computer, but he would find everything exactly as he had left it. He would have no reason to suspect that anything had been disturbed, no reason to know that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. That night at dinner, takeout pizza, because Mom was too exhausted from vacation to cook, Emma dominated the conversation with endless stories about Disneyland. Every time she paused for breath, our parents encouraged her to continue, asking questions and laughing at her animated descriptions. I ate my 2 slices of pizza in silence. Nobody asked me about my week. Nobody noticed that I had lost weight from subsisting on instant ramen. Nobody cared. "Can we go back next year?" Emma begged. "Please, it was the best week of my entire life." "We'll see, Princess," Dad said. "That's a pretty expensive trip." I nearly choked on my pizza. Expensive. They had spent my inheritance money to take my sister to Disneyland while leaving me at home, and now they were worried about the cost of doing it again. "I'm going to do homework," I said quietly, standing to clear my plate. "It's Sunday." "Nye," Mom said absently, scrolling through photos on her phone. Hundreds of pictures of Emma, I was sure. 0 of me. "I like to get ahead," I replied, which was true. In my previous life, school had been my only escape, the only place where I could sometimes feel competent and valued, until my parents had sabotaged those opportunities too. Upstairs in my tiny bedroom, Emma had the large room with the princess canopy bed and the walk-in closet, while I had what was basically a converted storage room. I opened my laptop and found an email from Catherine Wu. "Everything is filed. The hearing is scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. A court officer will serve your parents with papers on Wednesday morning. I've also located your great-aunt Helen. She's very interested in speaking with you. I'm attaching her contact information. She asked me to tell you that she's thought about you every day since your grandmother died, and she's been trying to reach out to you for years, but your parents blocked her letters and calls. Be prepared for your parents to react badly when they're served. They may become angry or accusatory. Remember that you have done nothing wrong. They are the ones who broke the law. If at any point you feel unsafe, call 911 immediately. You're a remarkably brave young woman. I'm proud to represent you." I read the email 3 times, letting the reality sink in. After Wednesday, there would be no going back. My parents would know that I had discovered their theft. They would know that I was fighting back. In my previous life, I had never fought back. I had accepted my role as the forgotten child, the disappointment, the burden. I had internalized their rejection so deeply that even as an adult, I had struggled to believe I deserved better. This time, I was choosing differently. I opened a new email and wrote to Great Aunt Helen. "Dear Aunt Helen, my name is Lily Chen. I'm your sister's granddaughter. I don't know if you remember me. I was very young when grandmother died. My lawyer, Catherine Wu, gave me your email address. She said you've been trying to contact me. I want you to know that I never forgot you. I kept the Christmas cards you sent when I was little. My parents hid them from me eventually, but I found them and kept them secret. I always wondered about you, wondered if you were like my grandmother, wondered if you would have loved me the way she did. I'm sorry this email is so strange. I'm in a difficult situation, and I'm about to do something that will change everything. I'm not sure what's going to happen or where I'll end up, but Ms. Wu said you might be willing to help me, and I really need someone on my side right now. Can we talk? Your great niece, Lily. I hit send before I could overthink it, then closed my laptop and lay down on my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Emma's laughter drifted through the walls. She was probably showing off her vacation photos to friends on video chat, talking about how perfect everything had been. I allowed myself a small smile in the darkness. Wednesday was 2 days away. Friday's hearing was 5 days away. My family had no idea that their world was about to implode, and it was going to be absolutely glorious. Wednesday morning arrived with cruel normalcy. I dressed for school in my usual thrift store clothes. Emma's school wardrobe cost thousands of dollars, but I was expected to make do with clearance rack basics and came downstairs to find the family at breakfast. Dad was reading the news on his tablet. Mom was making Emma's favorite French toast. Emma was texting friends, giggling at inside jokes I would never be part of. I poured myself a bowl of the generic cereal I was allowed to eat. The good cereal was for Emma, and ate standing by the counter as usual. There were only 4 chairs at our kitchen table, and one of them was consistently piled with Mom's shopping bags. The message was clear. There wasn't really room for me. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:15 a.m., just as I was rinsing my bowl. "Who's that?" Mom frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." Dad went to answer it, and I held my breath. "Mr. David Chen?" I heard an unfamiliar voice say. "I'm here to serve you with legal documents regarding the estate of Margaret Chen." There was a long pause, then What? I don't understand. My mother's estate was settled years ago. "Sir, you're being sued by the beneficiary of that estate for misappropriation of trust funds. You're also named in an emergency petition to remove you and your wife as trustees. There's a hearing scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. You're required to appear. Here are your copies." I heard papers rustling, then Dad's voice, sharp and angry. "This is ridiculous. Who filed this? This is some kind of mistake." "The petitioner is listed on the documents, sir. Have a good day." The door closed. I stayed frozen by the kitchen sink, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment of no return. Dad came back into the kitchen holding a stack of papers, his face pale with shock. Mom looked up from the French toast. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Someone is suing us. About my mother's estate. About Lily's trust fund." He looked directly at me for the first time in weeks, his eyes sharp with sudden suspicion. "They're claiming we misappropriated funds." Mom's spatula clattered against the pan. Emma looked up from her phone, confused. I met Dad's stare with the calmest expression I could manage. "I don't know what that means," I said softly, playing the innocent child they had always believed me to be. "Don't lie to me." His voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you do this? Did you somehow hire a lawyer?" "David, she's 12, Mom said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. "How would she even know about the trust?" "I don't know anything about a trust," I said, keeping my voice small and frightened, which wasn't entirely an act. They were both staring at me now, and Emma had put down her phone, sensing drama. "Is something wrong? Are we in trouble?" Dad's hands were shaking slightly as he flipped through the legal documents. I could see him reading, watching his face go from confused to shocked to furious as he absorbed the details. The petition laid out everything: the amount of the original inheritance, the pattern of withdrawals, the evidence of funds being spent on Emma instead of me, the correspondence discussing how to hide the theft. "This is impossible," he muttered. "How could anyone who would even know to—" He looked up at Mom. "Did you tell anyone? Your sister? Your mother?" "My mother is dead, David. I don't have a sister. What are you talking about?" He thrust the papers at her. "Read it. Someone has bank statements, emails, everything. They've been in my office. They've accessed my computer." I saw the exact moment when Mom's eyes found the most damaging detail in the petition. The email to their lawyer discussing how to handle it when I turned 18 and discovered they had spent all my money. Her face went white, then flushed red. Lily, her voice was ice. Come here, right now. I walked toward them slowly, letting fear show on my face. What did I do? Why are you angry? Did you go into your father's office? Mom demanded. Did you touch his computer? I'm not allowed in there, I whispered. You said I'd be punished if I ever went in Dad's office. Don't play dumb. Dad's voice was rising. Someone gave a lawyer access to private family documents. Someone in this house? Emma was with us at Disneyland. That leaves you. Maybe it was a break-in? I suggested, letting my voice tremble. While you were gone? Maybe someone broke in and stole things? Dad actually paused at this, considering. But Mom was smarter, or maybe just more suspicious. She looked at me hard, her eyes narrowing. When is your grandmother's birthday? It was a test. In my previous life, I wouldn't have known. My parents had erased every detail of my grandmother's existence from my life. But I had been reborn with all my memories, including the birthday I had eventually learned as an adult. March 15th, I said automatically, then realized my mistake. Mom's expression turned venomous. How would you know that? You were 3 when she died. We never told you her birthday. I had miscalculated. In trying to act innocent, I had revealed that I knew things I shouldn't know. My mind raced for an explanation. I found old birthday cards. In the attic. I was curious about her. The attic is locked, Dad said flatly. I found the key, I admitted, deciding that confessing to minor trespassing was better than revealing the full truth. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know about her. Nobody ever talks about her, and I thought maybe there would be pictures or something, things that would help me understand who she was. This was good, I realized. Let them think I was just a curious child who had stumbled onto something I didn't fully understand. Let them think this was accidental, not intentional. But Mom wasn't buying it. You hired a lawyer. A 12-year-old child somehow found and hired one of the most expensive estate attorneys in the city. How? I let tears fill my eyes. Not hard, given the circumstances. I didn't hire anyone. I don't even know what that means. Why are you being so mean to me? Stop it. Dad's voice was hard. Just stop. I don't know how you did this or who's helping you, but you need to understand something. That money was for the family, for all of us. We used it to take care of you and your sister, to provide for this household. You're trying to destroy this family over a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything. I was sobbing now, genuine emotion breaking through my calculated facade. Because even though I had expected this, even though I had planned for it, it still hurt to hear him lie so blatantly. To hear him claim that money spent exclusively on Emma had somehow been for my benefit too. Go to your room, Mom ordered. You're not going to school today, not until we figure out what's happening. But I have a test. Your room, now. I fled upstairs, slamming my door behind me. I heard their voices rise in argument below, harsh and panicked. Emma's high voice joined in, demanding to know what was happening. I heard Mom shushing her, Dad on the phone with someone, probably their lawyer. In my room, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick email to Catherine Wu. They know. They've been served. They're angry, but they don't know for sure that I did it. I'm supposed to stay home from school. Is that legal? Her response came within minutes. Keep yourself safe. If they prevent you from attending school, document it. That's educational neglect. Do you have food and water access? Can you lock your door? Yes to food and water. No lock on my door. If you feel threatened, call 911. The hearing is in 2 days. They can't hurt their case by doing something stupid now. Stay strong. The day crawled by in agonizing slowness. My parents' voices drifted up through the floorboards, sometimes angry, sometimes frightened. I heard them on the phone with lawyers, with their accountant, with someone from the bank. I heard Mom crying at one point, and Emma asking repeatedly what was wrong. Why was everyone upset? Nobody brought me lunch. At around 3 p.m., when I would normally be getting home from school, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My door burst open without a knock. Dad stood there, his face haggard. "We need to talk," he said. "Downstairs, family meeting." I followed him down to the living room where Mom sat on the couch looking like she'd aged 10 years in one day. Emma was there too, confused and anxious. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, trying to figure out if I was somehow dangerous. "Sit," Dad ordered, pointing to the chair across from them, the chair I normally wasn't allowed to use. I sat. "I've spent all day on the phone with lawyers," Dad began. "What you've done, what you're accusing us of, is very serious. You're tearing this family apart based on a child's misunderstanding of how finances work." I didn't. "Let me finish." His voice was sharp. "Your grandmother left money for your care. We have used that money for your care, for this family's expenses, to provide you with a home and food and clothing. Yes, some of it went to Emma's activities, but that's because Emma showed talent and promise that was worth investing in. We made decisions as parents about how to best allocate resources. That's not theft, that's parenting." I stared at him, this man who had let me survive on ramen for a week while taking my sister to Disneyland. This man who was trying to convince me that stealing millions of dollars was just parenting. "Here's what's going to happen," Mom said, her voice strained. "You're going to call that lawyer and tell her you made a mistake. Tell her you misunderstood what you found. Tell her you don't want to pursue this." "And if I don't?" The words came out before I could stop them. The temperature in the room dropped. Dad leaned forward, his expression dark. "Then you need to understand the consequences. If you go through with this, you're not just hurting us. You're destroying Emma's future. Every opportunity she's had, every achievement she's worked for, you'll be taking that away from her. Is that what you want? To ruin your sister's life out of jealousy?" I looked at Emma, who was staring at me with wide eyes. In my previous life, Emma had grown up to be cruel because our parents had taught her that I was worthless. But right now, she was just 9 years old, confused and scared. She didn't deserve to be used as a weapon against me. "Emma's future doesn't have to come from my inheritance," I said quietly. "That's not my fault. That's your choice." "You ungrateful," Mom started, but Dad held up a hand. "Last chance, Lily. Call the lawyer. Tell her to drop the case. We can pretend this never happened." "No," I said. The word felt powerful in my mouth. "No, I won't," Mom stood up abruptly. "Then you can pack your things. If you're going to accuse us of being unfit parents, you don't get to live under our roof." "You can't kick her out," Emma said suddenly, her voice small. "She's just a kid. Where would she go?" "That's not your concern, Emma," Mom said sharply. "Your sister has made her choice." But I had one more card to play. I pulled out my phone and opened the email app, showing them the screen. "I've already been in contact with Great Aunt Helen. She wants to meet me. She said I can stay with her in San Francisco." Mom's face went sheet white. "How do you know about Helen?" "She's been trying to contact me for years," I said, repeating what Catherine had told me. "You hid her letters. You blocked her calls. But she never stopped caring about me. She's coming. To the hearing on Friday." I watched the hope drain from their faces. They had thought they could bully me into submission, threaten me with homelessness, make me too scared to continue. But I had an escape route they hadn't anticipated, and now they knew it. "Get out of my sight," Dad said quietly, his voice full of venom. "Go to your room, and don't come out until Friday. You want to be alone? Fine. Be alone." I went upstairs, my legs shaking but my resolve firm. Behind me, I heard Emma start to cry, asking what was happening, why everything was falling apart. I heard Mom trying to comfort her, assuring her that everything would be fine, that I was just being difficult, that this would all blow over. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. The next day, Thursday, I stayed in my room as ordered. Nobody brought me meals, but I had anticipated this. The night before everything exploded, I had smuggled granola bars, crackers, and bottled water into my closet. I rationed them carefully, making them last. I heard my parents fighting through the walls. They were panicking, trying to figure out how to counter the evidence against them. I heard Dad on the phone with their lawyer, his voice getting louder and angrier as he apparently received bad news. I heard Mom sobbing in their bedroom, mourning the loss of the lifestyle my inheritance had funded. Emma knocked on my door around lunchtime. "Lily, are you okay? Mom said you're choosing not to come out, but I brought you a sandwich anyway." I opened the door a crack. Emma stood there holding a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on a paper towel, the best she could make herself. Her eyes were red from crying. "Thank you," I said softly, taking it. "Are you really trying to send Mom and Dad to jail?" she asked in a whisper. "I'm trying to get back what's mine," I replied. "Money that belonged to me that was supposed to be for my future. They spent it all on you instead." "I didn't know," Emma said, and I believed her. She was 9. She had no idea that her privileged lifestyle was funded by theft. "Will I have to give back all my stuff?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Probably not. You didn't do anything wrong, but Emma, they left me alone for a week with nothing but ramen. They took you to Disneyland and didn't even think about how I would feel. Does that seem fair to you?" She looked down at her shoes. "I asked why you weren't coming. Mom said you didn't want to, that you preferred to stay home." Of course they had lied to her. "Did you believe that?" Emma's silence was answer enough. She might be the favorite, but she wasn't stupid. She knew I would have given anything to go to Disneyland. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. "I'm sorry for everything." It was the first time anyone in this family had ever apologized to me. I felt tears prick my eyes. "It's not your fault," I said. "None of this is your fault." She nodded, then went back downstairs. I ate the sandwich slowly, savoring the fact that my sister, despite everything, had shown me more kindness than our parents ever had. That night, I received an email from Great Aunt Helen. "Dear Lily, I cannot tell you how it felt to receive your message. I have thought about you every single day since your grandmother died. Margaret loved you so much. You were the light of her life. She would be heartbroken to know what your parents have done. I want you to know that you have a home with me always. I am not young, I'm 74 years old, but I am healthy and active, and I have plenty of room in my house. San Francisco is a good place to grow up with excellent schools and opportunities. I would be honored to be part of your life. I'll be at the hearing on Friday. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone. Your grandmother's sister is here for you, little one. You are loved. Aunt Helen." I read the email 5 times, crying harder with each reading. In my entire first life, only 2 people had ever truly loved me. My grandmother, who I barely remembered, and a nurse named Jennifer who had held my hand as I died. Now I had a third, an aunt I didn't remember meeting, who had been waiting years for the chance to know me. I wrote back, "Thank you for not forgetting me. I'll see you tomorrow." Friday arrived with the weight of destiny. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a plain dress from the thrift store, worn but clean. My parents were already dressed, Dad in a suit, Mom in a conservative dress. They looked exhausted and furious. Emma hugged me before we left. "Good luck," she whispered. I hugged her back. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble floors and high ceilings. Catherine Wu met us in the hallway outside the courtroom, looking professional and confident in a sharp blazer. Next to her stood an elderly woman with silver hair and my grandmother's eyes. "Lily," Aunt Helen said softly, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and felt like coming home. "Oh, sweetheart, you look so much like her." My parents stood apart, glaring at us. Dad's lawyer, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, shuffled papers nervously. "All rise," the bailiff called, and we filed into the courtroom. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Catherine Wu presented her case with devastating precision. She showed the bank statements, the emails, the documented pattern of my inheritance being spent on Emma while I was neglected. She presented photographs I had taken during their Disneyland trip, the empty refrigerator except for ramen, my barren room compared to Emma's palace. The pile of bills marked Emma's dance lessons, sitting on Dad's desk. She called me to the stand, and I testified calmly about years of being forgotten, about the week I was left alone, about finding the documents in Dad's office. "Did your parents ever tell you about your inheritance?" Catherine asked. "No," I said. "They never mentioned it at all." Did they ever explain where the money for your sister's activities came from? They said Emma was special, that she deserved the best. And what about you? What did you deserve? I looked directly at my parents. I don't think they ever thought about that. My father's lawyer tried to argue that the money had been spent on family expenses that benefited both children. But when Catherine presented the itemized statements showing things like Emma's custom pageant dress, $3,200, and Emma's private birthday party, $15,000, his argument fell apart. The judge, an older woman with stern features, looked increasingly angry as the evidence mounted. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," she said finally, "I have reviewed the evidence presented today, and I am appalled. You were entrusted with your daughter's inheritance, a substantial sum left by a grandmother who clearly loved her. Instead of honoring that trust, you systematically looted that inheritance to fund a lifestyle for your other daughter while leaving the beneficiary with nothing. You left a 12-year-old home alone for a week with inadequate food, all while taking a luxury vacation on her stolen money. This is not a matter of different parenting choices. This is theft, neglect, and a profound betrayal of your duties as both parents and trustees." She looked down at her papers, then back at my parents. "I am granting the emergency petition. You are hereby removed as trustees of Lily Chen's inheritance, effective immediately. An independent trustee will be appointed to assess what remains of the estate and to manage it until Ms. Chen reaches majority. You are ordered to provide a full accounting of every withdrawal and expenditure from the trust for the past 9 years." "Your Honor," Dad's lawyer began, but the judge held up a hand. "I'm not finished. I am also ordering that Lily Chen be placed in the temporary custody of her great-aunt, Helen Martinez. Mrs. Martinez, are you still willing to take custody?" "Absolutely, Your Honor," Aunt Helen said firmly. "Then it is so ordered. The minor child will be released to your custody today. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, you will have supervised visitation rights only, pending the outcome of the civil suit and any potential criminal investigation. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review." Mom let out a choked sob. Dad sat frozen, his face ashen. Emma, sitting in the gallery, looked lost and scared. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore, I'm ordering you to cover the costs of moving Lily's belongings to San Francisco, and you are prohibited from disposing of, hiding, or damaging any of her personal property. A court-appointed supervisor will oversee the packing to ensure compliance. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. It was over. The rest happened quickly, like a dream. A court-appointed guardian, a kind woman named Mrs. Torres, accompanied Aunt Helen and me back to my parents' house. My parents had been ordered to stay away while I packed, so only Emma was there, sitting on her bed crying. I packed my few belongings, my books, my clothes, some photos I had hidden away. It all fit in 2 suitcases, 12 years of life packed in under an hour. "Can I write to you?" Emma asked tearfully as I finished. "Can we stay in touch?" "Of course," I said, hugging her. "This isn't your fault, Emma, none of it. You're my sister, and I don't blame you for any of this." "Will Mom and Dad go to jail?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe. They did something really wrong." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't notice. I'm sorry I was part of why this happened. You were just a kid. You still are." I squeezed her hand. "Be good, okay? Study hard, be kind to people, and don't let them teach you to treat people the way they treated me." She nodded, crying too hard to speak. Mrs. Torres drove us to the airport. Aunt Helen had booked us on a flight that evening. As we drove away from the house I had lived in for 12 years, I looked back once. Emma stood in the window waving. I waved back. That was the last time I saw her in person for 3 years. The aftermath unfolded over the following months and years, and it was more satisfying than I could have imagined. First, the independent trustees report revealed that of my original $3.8 million inheritance, only $127,000 remained. The rest had been spent exactly as I had documented, on Emma's activities, on my parents' lifestyle, on investments in Dad's failing business ventures. The trustee valued the total misappropriation at $3.67 million plus lost investment growth, which would have brought the total to approximately $5.2 million if properly managed. Second, the civil suit proceeded. Catherine Wu was relentless. She discovered that my parents had also taken out credit cards in my name using my social security number, planning to saddle me with debt before I turned 18. She found evidence that they had been planning to sell the house and use my inheritance to buy a larger one in Emma's name only. Third, and most satisfyingly, the district attorney did file criminal charges: felony theft, fraud, identity theft, and child neglect. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. My father was sentenced to 4 years in prison. My mother received 3 years. Both were ordered to pay full restitution plus damages, totaling over $6 million. They would never be able to pay it, of course. They had no assets. Everything they owned had been purchased with my stolen money. The court seized what it could: the house, the cars, Emma's college fund, which turned out to be a tiny fraction of what they had told her it would be. Dad's business was liquidated. They declared bankruptcy, but the debt to me survived it because it was based on fraud. They ended up serving their full sentences. I heard through Emma that they spent their prison time blaming me, painting themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. Emma, to her credit, stopped believing their stories after the first year. As for me, life in San Francisco with Aunt Helen was a revelation. She lived in a beautiful Victorian house in the Sunset District, full of books and art and memories of my grandmother. She enrolled me in a good public school where teachers actually noticed me, where I could finally show what I was capable of. With the remaining funds from my inheritance carefully managed by the independent trustee, and with the restitution slowly trickling in from my parents' garnished prison wages and seized assets, I had financial security for the first time. The trustee invested wisely. By the time I turned 18, my inheritance had grown back to nearly $4 million. But money was only part of it. Aunt Helen gave me what I had never had: unconditional love. She attended my school plays, celebrated my achievements, held me when I cried, and told me stories about my grandmother. She made sure I went to therapy to process the years of abuse and neglect. She encouraged me to find my passions. I discovered I loved writing. In my previous life, my parents had mocked my stories and thrown away my notebooks. Now, I had a space to create. By the time I was 16, I had published my first novel, a young adult book about a girl who gets a second chance at life and chooses to fight back against injustice. It became a bestseller. I dedicated it to my grandmother and to Aunt Helen. Emma and I maintained contact through letters and video calls. She had a harder time of it. She was placed with a foster family after our parents went to prison, and she struggled with the sudden loss of privilege and the harsh reality of what our parents had done. But she worked hard in school, earned scholarships, and we gradually rebuilt our relationship as adults. She apologized countless times for not seeing, not speaking up, not protecting me. I forgave her because she had been a child too, another victim of our parents' toxicity, even if she had been victimized differently. When I turned 18, I received the distribution from grandfather's trust, the $200,000 that my parents had indeed tried to hide. It came to me intact with interest because the trustee had found it and protected it. I used part of it to help Emma with college expenses. She cried when I told her, unable to believe I would help her after everything. "You're my sister," I said simply. "What they did isn't your fault." I graduated from Stanford at 22 with a degree in creative writing. My second and third novels were even more successful than the first. I started a foundation to help children who had been victims of financial abuse by their parents, offering legal assistance and support. Aunt Helen lived to see me graduate, to see me become successful, to see me happy. She died peacefully at 83, holding my hand, telling me how proud my grandmother would have been. She left me her house and her considerable savings. But more importantly, she left me the knowledge that I was loved, that I had always been worthy of love, and that my parents' rejection said everything about them and nothing about me. By the time I was 25, 3 years younger than I had been when I died in my previous life, I was a successful author, a philanthropist, and a survivor who had turned her trauma into purpose. I had friends, a career I loved, and a sense of peace I had never known in my first life. My parents were released from prison when I was 23. I never saw them again. They sent letters occasionally, always asking for money, never apologizing. I threw them away unread. Emma told me they had aged badly, that prison had broken something in them, that they lived in a small apartment and worked minimum wage jobs, forever unable to escape the consequences of their crimes. I felt nothing but relief that they were no longer part of my life. Emma and I had dinner together last month. She's 28 now, a teacher, married to a kind man who knows our history and loves her anyway. She's in therapy, working through her own trauma, learning to separate her identity from the golden child role our parents forced her into. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't fought back? She asked me over dessert. I thought about my first life, about dying alone at 28 with nothing and no one, about spending 16 years believing I was worthless because that's what my family had taught me. Sometimes, I admitted, but I try not to dwell on it. I got a second chance and I took it. That's what matters. I'm glad you did, she said quietly. I'm glad you saved yourself. And I'm glad you didn't let them convince you that you deserved what they did to you. I smiled. Me too. That night, back in my apartment, a beautiful space overlooking the bay, purchased with money I had earned from my books, I opened my laptop and began writing a new novel. This one was about two sisters, one golden and one forgotten, and how they found their way back to each other after their family's betrayal. I dedicated it to Emma, who had been brave enough to see the truth and love me anyway, and to my younger self, who had been brave enough to fight back. The book would be called The Forgotten Daughter, and it would tell the story of a girl who died and was reborn with the knowledge she needed to save herself. It would be my most successful novel yet, but more than that, it would help thousands of children recognize the signs of parental abuse and know that they deserved better. As I typed the first words, I felt my grandmother's presence around me, and Aunt Helen's, and all the love that had been waiting for me once I was brave enough to reach for it. I had left home and never come back, and it was the best decision I ever made. In my first life, I had been destroyed by my family's cruelty. In this one, I had destroyed their power over me and built something beautiful from the ashes, and I had never been happier.